Welcome to Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville. Join 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Hello once again, and welcome to Mike's on Mike. I'm Mike Miller, along with Mike Hightower, who's with me in studio, and Mike Tolbert, who is safely in his horse farm, deciding that he's going to be baling hay today instead of joining us here live in studio, but we still have him, and that's important. Our very special guest today is Lori Boyer, who's been the CEO of the Downtown Investment Authority now for 5 years, actually, isn't it?
Yes, almost.
It said 4 here, but it's almost been 5 years. Lori is an attorney with a deep background in finance, former member and president of the Jacksonville City Council, and the DIA board picked Lori over candidates for the job from New Orleans and Kansas City, and we welcome you to the program. It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Want to remind our viewers and listeners that, of course, our show is brought to you by the Jacksonville Historical Society and the great Alan Bliss, who's their CEO, and to the donors who have earmarked their donations towards support of Mike's on Mike. We thank you all very, very much for your support and to allow us to stay on the air the way we have.
We much appreciate that. Thanks.
We're going to get into the DIA and Lori's role and all the rest of that in just a couple of moments, but there really is something which I think is extremely pressing at this point that came out just today, as a matter of fact, and it has to do with a poll from the Public Opinion Research Lab at the University of North Florida talking about what their poll results have shown as far as what the people are really looking for and what they want. And some were very surprised to see that the negotiations for the stadium is not being well received by a majority of people who were polled in this. And in fact, the ironic part is that the idea, the proposal to build a new jail and move the police memorial building as well to a new location actually got more favorable ratings than did the renovation of the Jacksonville Jaguars and the stadium, even though, and this is even though, people were polled and asked the question, would you be willing to spend $1 billion if it meant that the Jaguars would stay in Jacksonville? And they still were unable to get a majority of people to say yes. They got more people than the initial response, which was only 6%, believe it or not, who agreed with the proposal the way it was presented. But that went up to about 42% once they said, if this means that the Jaguars would leave, how do you feel? But that's still far short of 50%. And that's a tall hill for, for Shad Khan and for the city to have to climb before they get anything approved.
It's really a good thing.
Are you really that surprised, Mike? Are you really that surprised?
Miller or Hightower? Because you know me, I get surprised at everything. I think what I was surprised at, I was surprised more that there was that kind of support for the jail.
That's where I was. I'm glad I wasn't on the air and said.
Well, let me tell you why I think. I'm trying to get my damn words in here. I know I'm not there, but help me out.
That'll teach you to be doing this from a stall, horse stall.
This probably has nothing to do with it, in fact. But if you think about it, with the crime rate like it is, and crime being the subject of everyday talk, a jail is probably looked at as a necessity. On the other hand, a football stadium owned by that's benefiting a taxpayer benefiting a billionaire probably may be looked at as a luxury. And that seems to me to be what this is about. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that seems to me to be what this is all about.
Let me do this. Let's get into the DIA a little bit more here, and then as we get near the end of the show, let's come back to this and talk about it, because it does deserve discussion. It really does.
I don't want to take away from Lori.
Right. And Lori, if you don't mind me asking a very sophomore question at the beginning, what is the DIA and why the hell would you want to be a part of it?
And what does DIA stand for?
DIA, Downtown Investment Authority.
All right.
So DIA was created in 2012, and it was really an idea that is not new to Jacksonville. We once had the Downtown Development Authority, and then we had Jacksonville Economic Development Commission. But JEDC was citywide. And I guess one of the things when you think about a consolidated city-county government is it's huge. We have 19 council members. We're all concerned about outlying suburbs and district issues. And so the idea that there would be a concentrated focus on downtown, I think was a necessity if you wanted to revitalize downtown.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it was just too fragmented. The interest wasn't nobody was working directly on that specific effort.
Right.
So 2012, council created it. Mayor Alvin Brown's administration, recommended by the Civic Council and the Chamber, and a whole bunch of groups were supportive of it. I do think that we have two roles. We exist in two capacities. One is we are the economic development agency for downtown. And so what does that mean? That means we work with the chamber on creating jobs and bringing new businesses to downtown. So when in some other part of the city or in St. Johns County, Jax USA might be bringing in a new manufacturing facility, et cetera, we were involved in the FIS deal to make sure that FIS stayed in Jacksonville, and in fact, when the merger happened, that they relocated to a new facility downtown. So that's one role. The other role is we are the redevelopment agency. That's a state function, actually created by state statute, but that means we handle property dispositions, and we can provide incentives, and we get a tax increment. What I had mentioned before we went on the air was the fact that our tax increment was completely absorbed until 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, by the outstanding debt on 3 parking garages that were constructed as part of the Better Jacksonville plan.
Let me just interrupt here so people understand what a tax increment district
Sure.
is. It's a portion of the taxes that are collected within the boundaries of the DIA, then go to improvements within those boundaries and can't be used elsewhere. Is that correct?
Mostly.
Essentially.
Essentially correct,
So
except that it is only the incremental growth over the base. So whatever the taxes were when you were created still go to the city government, but the growth that you produce in tax revenue is then the part. That's the increment that comes back to the district to be used in that area.
And so what you're saying is that increment that was given to you, you ended up having to use it to pay off a debt as opposed to doing new things.
Correct.
Wow. So you really never really you started with a debt which you had to take care of before you ever got into anything.
And we still have that debt, by the way. But we ended up in, there is, over time, if you look at the amount of the outstanding debt plus interest, it's now in the range of $90 million.
Debt?
Yes.
Debt.
That came out of the tax increment district. Now, principal amount was maybe in the $60 million range. With accrued interest, it's now at 90 because it hasn't been paid back, obviously. That was advanced on those garages. We still are paying annual debt service on them, but we were able to, through litigation and a settlement, to refinance them, come up with different terms, and reduced our obligation in half on an annual basis.
We're going to put a slide up during the program here that will show what the actual boundaries are of the DIA area. But
Great.
If you could try to kind of explain that until that slide comes up, that would be
It's really pretty easy.
Okay.
So for those of you who know downtown at all,
Right.
We're talking about Interstate 95 is the western boundary of downtown.
Okay.
All the way to the Fuller Warren Bridge. The northern boundary of downtown is basically State and Union Street. There's a little bit that goes north of that, but State and Union Street takes you from I-95 over to the Matthews Bridge.
Okay.
So everything south of that is in downtown. And then on the south bank, I-95 forms the southern boundary. So anything north of I-95 on the south bank is part of downtown. So this includes Brooklyn.
Okay.
It includes the Sports and Entertainment District. It includes La Villa. It includes City Center, or the Central Business District that you would normally think of, Cathedral District, and South Bank.
And how many acres or square blocks is that?
3.9 square miles
Okay.
is within the boundaries of downtown. Very large for a typical downtown.
That was going to be my next question.
Those boundaries were created back in the 80s as part of the tax increment district boundaries.
Okay. Mike Tolbert was going to ask a question about how the DIA is functioning now compared to the 8 years that it was under Mayor Curry.
Yeah, Laurie, thanks for being here today. My memory is that when Mayor Curry was in office, there were times it seemed as if the DIA was left out or becoming irrelevant. That was especially true, it seemed, on the Lot J situation until the very end. As I recall, y'all y'all did make a report, but it got watered down at the very end. You think it's going to be better now with Mayor Deegan? Do you see any difference in the way things are being handled in the best interest of downtown?
Well, so first of all, I take exception to the kind of lack of relevance comment, which you probably knew I would, and go back to my description to Mike Miller.
Excuse me, one for Boyer and 0 for Tolbert.
It's a good thing you're long distance.
Can't throw things across the room. If you go back to what our role is and what we do, from a redevelopment agency standpoint, I think we've accomplished a lot during the Curry administration. So when I talk about the FIS building, and that involved a Florida Blue relocation of parking and then the construction of the new building, we've increased the number of residential units and the number of residents downtown from 2,000 to 7,500 in that period. If you look at what was being built back in 2012, it was a 7-Eleven, it was new windows at Mocha, it was a renovation in the chamber. We're now spending, private investment is spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I have about 1,000 residential units under construction right now in downtown, all at the same time.
How many again?
1,000.
Wow.
So
In
It was a
addition to
bad
the
choice of words.
well, but that's in addition to the 7,500.
residents.
Right.
Correct. That will bring us to over 10,000 residents when those are come online. And they're all over downtown. There is the One Riverside project, that's the Old Times Union site. Artia's on the South Bank. Doro is in the Sports and Entertainment District. Townhomes in La Villa. Lofts at Cathedral that Vescor's doing over. I mean, they're all over. But that's how much momentum there is and how much is under construction right now. That's our core business. So, Mike, to your point, though, when you talk about large-scale things like a stadium deal or a Lot J deal, those are always going to be handled in Jacksonville city government by the mayor and the council, both from a resource standpoint and from a political standpoint. Just to your point about the poll earlier, that is a political decision, that is a citywide decision about where we want to spend resources. It is not something that has either been delegated to us from an authority standpoint, nor would be appropriate for staff and an appointed body to make those order of magnitude decisions on behalf of the city. So we do the planning, and
But
we
you
do
can make recommendations.
we can make recommendations.
Yeah, I don't think I expected you to say that y'all should be responsible for paying for things, but certainly you have the professional capacity over there to make recommendations on what you think is right and wrong and what's in best interest.
And ultimately, the city council did ask us to prepare a report with an economic analysis on Lot J, which we did. But it was negotiated as part of a stadium area activity. I think it probably was a time at which the state statute or state interpretation that requires those things to go through a redevelopment agency had just been rendered, and that was new, and now that's an accepted principle. So there is a reason that we will be engaged in the future. And on current discussions, not about the stadium. Again, that's a city investment, nor about the jail, but maybe about where it is relocated to or how we reuse the property that is vacated.
And not to take up for my colleague, Ms. Tolbert, but I having been during the JEA and the Lot J situation that we were, I think that really kind of underscores one of the issues that we've talked about here, Lori, is that it's only those big issues that are controversial that get written up in the paper. What you've just said is startling to me, is how much has happened, but nobody's heard about it. The JEA or Lot J is something that people still talk about. It goes back to people don't really understand what's going on in town. Not so whether Mike used the right word or not, I think the perception is out there is nothing going on downtown, and I think what you've just said is that is not the case.
That's true, and we're
And I knew better than that. I knew better than that.
Somebody write this down. What
I
Mike?
misspoke. That was a bad word I used.
I'm sorry. That's now Hightower 1, Tolbert 2.
Not that we keep score here. No, but that is a good clarification. But that really kind of goes to that the lack of understanding or the lack of communication that's going on with our town, which kind of leads to a couple of the other topics we're going to be talking about.
Lark, let me ask a question, Laurie. I know you guys, you say that residential is your number one priority, and I think you said it was your core business, and I understand that. But help others understand why that is essential, why that's foundational to what has to happen in downtown.
Yeah.
Okay, so start with the principle that we had pre-COVID, and it's about the same, 56,000 people more or less who come to work in downtown.
56,000.
56,000 people work downtown. And
wow.
Which is down about 10,000.
10,000.
That's about 10,000 down from where it used to be.
Okay.
It used to be about 65,000.
But it's been 56 since 2019, which...
Yeah, I don't understand.
So from my perspective, then what you're looking at is we had about 2,000 people who live downtown. So from a commuter standpoint, everybody is fleeing to the suburbs. If you don't have residences downtown, you're not going to have retail, because what you have is you have no demand for restaurants and retail on nights, weekends, coffee shops in the morning. All you have is what's in those office towers, and people stay in their buildings. If you want to be a vibrant urban environment, and we look at this not just from the perspective of, oh, wouldn't it be fun to go downtown and it'll increase tourism and those things, but also from a pure economic development, business recruiting perspective. We have a terrific suburban lifestyle in Jacksonville. We have magnificent beaches and beach lifestyle in Jacksonville. What we can't compete with other cities on is that urban lifestyle. So when we're trying to bring in talent and recruit new companies to relocate to Jacksonville, that's something that is a missing piece here that we think is really critical, and all the other reasons to have a good downtown. But that's an important part of it. So.
Yeah, well, then if you go back to what you said previously, if our downtown boundary is larger than the typical downtown, then not only are we looking at trying to get people to live downtown, you've got a larger area in which to bring retail and keep people downtown. Correct?
True.
Is that?
And what we are actually seeing is, so downtown has grown from the edges. Concentrations of residential density, and we have tables and graphs of this, are in Brooklyn, obviously, and on South Bank. And in those areas, you're starting to see retail become self-sustaining. So you see retail shopping centers in Brooklyn, and you see new Whole Foods coming to Brooklyn, and the market studies that support a concentration of people within a certain radius are working in those areas. They don't work yet in La Villa, Cathedral, Sports and Entertainment, but that's why we're building that population throughout downtown.
So that Publix that finally got to San Marco after decades was, at least we were there. We're starting.
Right. And no different than what you're seeing where you already have Fresh Market and now you have a Whole Foods coming in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Which is even closer to City Center.
Mike, did you want to mention about...
I'd like to ask you about incentives.
Yeah.
I want to ask her about incentives. Laurie, it seems to me they are not as controversial or unpopular as they once were, but I do think they're still misunderstood. Tell us how incentives work, what makes you decide to give incentives, and do the incentives you provide, do they have clawbacks?
I love the question. Thank you.
He's been practicing all weekend for this question.
One for me. That's one for me. Lord.
Okay, I got it.
All right, well, give him a half. Give him a half.
Okay, so the answer, first of all, is most of the incentives that we provide are generated by the development itself. So the standard tool in our toolbox from an incentive perspective is what's called a rev grant, a recaptured, it's a tax rebate. So if a new development comes in and it generates $1 million worth of taxes, and over 20 years we give them back $500,000 of the taxes they pay in, we get $500 more than we started with. Oh. And they get $500 of it. So that's the tax rebate, the rev grant. So without the new development, you wouldn't have any of that resource. So it is a self-generating incentive, if you will. The other incentives that we provide are, I will say, and so to your question of why do we give the incentives are structured to drive desired behavior. So, for example, we provide REV grants for residential development, those tax rebates for residential. We want people to build more residential, but we also want them to make it resilient. So they get 10% of the REV grant for adding certain resilient features, and they get 10% of a REV grant for adding shared parking as opposed to building their own, so that we don't have more dead parking areas. And they get another increment for putting a restaurant or ground floor retail in the building. So we use it as a carrot to entice behaviors and development activity that we want to see. And so that's really the essence of why it's provided. It's also provided to level the playing field between downtown and the suburbs. So from the downtown perspective, A, we require parking garages and structured parking. That's more expensive than a surface lot. B, most of the ground has been developed twice or three times in the past. So when somebody starts to work, they find old rails underneath or some contamination, so it's more expensive. The other thing is that from an overall city perspective, if you're really weighing the whole picture, when we take new development and put it someplace far away from downtown that's never been built before, and we build a new fire station there to serve them, and we extend a road there, we're investing major city funds in facilitating that new development. You don't have to do that when it's downtown. Mm-hmm. So the incentive is kind of balancing that out. So that's a couple reasons why we provide the incentive.
There are a number of issues that...
what about the clawback?
Clawbacks, almost all of them either have a clawback or they have what's called completion grants, so they're not paid until the product is delivered.
All right, for the folks who may not be in this thing, clawback, quick definition.
Clawback means that you can recover the money you paid to someone. They have to give it back if they don't perform. So that would only be true if you're giving it to them early, or in the case of some of these REV grants, if a developer commits to add a certain number of jobs and then they don't actually add the jobs that they promised, you can get your money back. They have to pay you back what you provided them.
Great.
Couple of issues we want to talk about. If you don't mind, kind of give us, and maybe we'll call this a sort of a lightning round, if that'll work. But kind of give us a half a minute on each of these as far as the status of these programs, because these have been around a long time and people want to know just where it is. Let's start with what our guest last week, Matt Carlucci, wanted to talk a lot about, which is the Laura Street Trio. He's been highly invested in that in his career. Where are we with that? I've been hearing that since I moved here, since I think 93.
Yeah.
So the Laura Street Trio is privately owned, and the Laura Street Trio has had 2 different development deals approved by DIA and City Council that never were executed upon. And now the developer has a new development plan, new proposal for what he wants to build, new request for incentives. The DIA board did not support that request, thought the request didn't have enough developer equity in it, would require waivers, exceeded the return on investment. So at this point, it stands that one or more council members may introduce legislation to facilitate that, but we did not.
Okay. Conn's Four Seasons Hotel. Where are we with the hotel?
Under construction.
Under construction. That was a quickie.
Yeah.
MOSH?
MOSH has to raise $40 million of private funds by December 31st.
Of this year.
Write a check, will you, Tolbert? It's only 40.
Mm-hmm.
Is that December of this year?
Yes, sir.
40 million.
Wow.
Yep. Or they might ask for an extension of time for some small time period, but the idea is they don't actually get to start construction and have their ground lease effective until they do that. That was a trigger, because at some point, if they're not going to be able to raise the money, we don't want that land encumbered. That's a valuable piece of riverfront land.
Right.
Now, we think MOSH would be a tremendous asset on Bay Street. We want them to be successful. We hope it happens, but it's not a public museum. It's a private facility, nonprofit, and they've got to raise a substantial part of that. We donated the land.
Are there plans for that land if they move to Bay Street?
If they move to Bay Street.
Yes.
Well, if they move to Bay Street, then the idea is that really you would connect City Center from the Hyatt all the way down to the stadium with the Shipyards West Park, Hogan's Creek improvements in the Emerald Trail, then MOSH. So when it's referred to as the Museum District, I mean, it's a pretty exciting development if they are successful and can bring that to fruition.
Do we have any idea where they are at the 40, on raising the 40?
I heard a while ago they were over 20, but I don't know. I mean, I don't get a weekly update on it.
Okay.
Okay. Ford on Bay.
Yeah, what is Ford on Bay? For the
It's an automobile. That
I know. I was thinking a Ford that's in
one,
the bay.
One
I was
Miller,
thinking.
It's a marketing name that CBRE assigned to the former courthouse site because it was where the cows forded, and it's on Bay Street.
I knew it was a test to see if you knew.
But the answer is on that project, the developer is still very interested in doing it. They wanted to add a hotel to the residential tower they had talked about. We're very supportive of it. They have a lot of retail interest in it. Some of the big users that take 10,000 square feet plus. So that's really exciting. Market economics don't work today.
All right, this is one that I keep looking at, but I want to make sure I say it. It's Riverfront Park at the landing site.
Which is also known as Riverfront Plaza.
Okay.
Okay? And it's under construction.
It is under construction.
Right. So the first part was
to be what?
To be a park.
To be a park.
The entire, so.
No, 3/4 of the site is a park. 1/4 of the site was saved as a private redevelopment site. And actually there's another restaurant pad too. But the majority of the site is designed to be a park.
Uh-huh.
And construction started in, I believe, late July. They started on the road relocation where the old Sister Cities parcel used to be, tearing up that road because that now gets incorporated in the park and is part of the playground area and coffee shop right on that corner.
All right. So you've answered part of that. Friendship Fountain.
So let me just say, this was both with Riverfront Plaza, all of these, and I mentioned it to you. DIA does not manage capital projects. So all of these capital projects that you're mentioning are either a public works project or a parks project.
Okay.
And so I get updates from them. I get to participate in discussions as to how they impact my adjacent private developments and things, but I don't get to manage and drive completion of the project.
So the money comes from the city.
CIP.
Right. So that's not your money.
Nope. And it is not my management. I don't work with procurement to get the contract bid. I don't talk to the contractor on a regular basis. I don't have any of that direct contract management of the delivery. So to answer your question on Friendship Fountain, I know that the construction of the fountain part itself is well underway. They had hoped it would open by Memorial Day. They were waiting on some speakers to be delivered. Don't know where the speaker delivery is. The adjacent playground space that's part of it, I'm told now will be, I thought it would be done by December, but I think it's delayed and won't be, maybe a year. So I don't have an exact timeline on when all of that park space is going to be delivered.
And the last one on our lightning rod, One Riverside.
One Riverside is the former Times Union publishing site. The
Correct.
residential phase 1 is under construction. Pretty strong out of the ground. The garage is almost complete, and they're probably 4 stories up on the residential right now. The retail, Whole Foods, and the other retail space can't start till we get the creek relocated, and the creek construction work is supposed to start by October 1st on the mouth of the creek.
Mr. Tolbert, you had a couple yourself you were going to ask?
Yeah, I have a couple in the lightning rod. Thank you, Hightower, for cutting me off again.
That's a -1 for Hightower.
This next one is pretty near to my heart, Lori. Back in 79 and 80, when I did the jazz festival at Mayport, and then it became obvious we had to relocate it because of the size. I picked a piece of ground called Metropolitan Park across from the Gator Bowl that was only used twice a year to park cars on during football games. A year later, it became Metropolitan Park as we know today. we've had all kind of conversation about what the future of Metropolitan Park is, and I have no earthly idea where it stands now. What is the latest you know about Metropolitan Park?
So Metropolitan Park, and in particular that part of Metropolitan Park that is east of the Four Seasons. So you may be referring to maybe a larger parcel initially.
No, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, is right now being designed by Civitas. The Parks Department put out a contract for professional services for design, and they are working with Civitas to redesign the park. I know the intention is that it would still function as the large outdoor venue for concerts or for things like World of Nations that we hold there, but it would also, as opposed to having the bowl, would have a surface that would allow us to use it for other activities, other days of the week. So whether there would be pickleball courts or other things that could be part of the park, and allow it to be activated when we don't have an event. I know that's part of the intent.
That's encouraging. Thank you for that.
Let me ask.
I've got one.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, you go ahead. No, you're the host.
No, I'm not. I'm the ringmaster, not the host.
You're the scorekeeper. You're the scorekeeper.
That's much better. I wasn't going to ask this, but you've kind of let me into it, and that is with the vast boundaries of the DIA's authority. One of the complaints that we have heard, in fact, I think it was also part of the UNF poll, was the issue people had with transportation downtown, particularly. If I can call upon my alma mater at JTA and talk about the autonomous vehicle program that Mr. Ford and others and the board are trying to put together and have been since 2018 when I was still there. But it's getting a lot of criticism all of a sudden, and there's a general feeling that we may be too far ahead of the curve to really be able to put this into motion and implement it. What are you hearing in that? And if we aren't able to do that, let's say in the next 5 years, how are we going to solve the transportation issue for people to be able to get around downtown without having to use their cars?
Wow.
You can invite me back for another whole session to talk about that. But here's what I'll say.
Want to come on with Ford?
First of all,
sorry, Nat.
I'm not going to take over JTA's role, right?
Right.
So,
but how do you see it?
No, how I see it is I think that having short distance, frequent commuter transportation within downtown is critical. So whether that is a trolley or a streetcar or the U2C or whatever type of vehicle it is, we need that. And I'm supportive of it, and I encourage that. Now, in terms of the things you're reading about whether this is a good investment or the technology is too soon, that's not my area of expertise, and I defer to others to make those decisions. But I do think that it's important for downtown we have that. Now, I can go into other things too. You know, we're very focused on ensuring that we have more trees on the sidewalk because part of our challenge is it's too darn hot to walk from one place to another, and that you have frequent locations along the Riverwalk where you can buy an ice cream cone or a beverage. I mean, some of this is also practical, where part of why we don't like to walk downtown is there are kind of deserts between places, and you need to make that experience a more comfortable experience for people. People need to feel safe doing that.
Right.
You need activated storefronts so that they don't feel like it's dark in between spaces.
Mike Tolbert, were you going to ask about the Emerald Trail?
Yeah, yes, I was. Speaking of walking downtown, the Emerald Trail has developed a reputation as being a game saver. Tell me, how do you think it's going to affect the future of downtown?
I think it's going to be huge for downtown. I'm very excited about it. I think it's a really positive step in downtown, but it's not just downtown. So it's a 30-mile network.
Right.
It is bicycle and pedestrian, and it's a protected trail system in most circumstances. So, which means that a mom and two kids on little bicycles or with a stroller are going to feel safe, like they're not in the middle of a roadway.
Okay, not to interrupt, but you're saying 30 miles. So can you kind of give us an idea of what 30 miles looks like in this proposal?
Sure. So the important thing is think of it as a spider web, and downtown is the center of the spider web.
Okay.
And what you have spokes that are going out into all of the nearby neighborhoods, many of which are underserved neighborhoods. And it's specifically designed to go past schools, go to centers where people congregate. So it's really well thought out, and it connects not only within downtown, but to downtown from surrounding areas. So critical elements downtown, the La Villa Link, which goes down Lee Street, comes from the rail yard district across Interstate 95 into downtown, down Lee Street, past Lift Every Voice and Sing Park, connects to Park Street. That's under construction, due to be complete this fall. Hogan Street, that connects FSCJ down to the river, that's in design. We have about 60% design. Hopefully will be under construction by the end of the year, end of the fiscal year, not necessarily end of 23. Hogan's Creek is following, obviously, Hogan's Creek itself and coming from UF Health all the way down to the river. Similarly, on the South Bank, you have links that are going out into the South Bank, and there's a whole loop on the South Bank, much of which is under construction.
Okay. So, Mike, I was going to ask, we've talked about this twice when we talk about the river. Talk about resiliency. That's an issue. It's gotten a lot of, unfortunately, my years at JEA on the board and then decide, but, we've had flooding. Resiliency is a big issue. We've heard all kinds of costs. How does that impact what we're trying to do with development? And if it's a critical issue, how do we pay for it? And where are we with that? I know Mayor Deegan has talked about it, but there's got to be an overlap because that also impacts what y'all are doing at DIA.
Absolutely. So in that regard, we are deferring to the study that the Chief Resiliency Officer has been working on, that Public Works has been developing. It's not complete yet, so we don't have the final recommendations. But what I can tell you is that part of that whole park network that we're looking on the riverfront is a resiliency effort, in as much as those are designed to be able to flood and recover. City is also raising bulkheads. They're raising bulkheads downtown and elsewhere. That's a hardening effort. That's a resiliency effort. But that alone doesn't solve the problem, which is why you need that buffered land area that can flood and recover. Everywhere there's an Emerald Trail segment along the creeks, McCoy's Creek, Hogan's Creek, those are looked at as providing a resiliency buffer. And they are not only flood projects, flood control projects, where they're taking properties that previously flooded out of the flood zone, but they're also providing wetland areas that can absorb some of the water and absorb some of the resiliency. So there are a lot of things happening. Current buildings, like when you look at what MOSH is doing or what we've talked about doing in Shipyards West Park, we're putting the parking at grade with a permeable surface so the water can soak in, and then the habitable space is a floor up. So it won't flood.
Right.
But the parking can flood and recover. So a lot of different ways to build in resiliency.
Let me, at the risk of opening up another program, let me ask this anyhow. We've all seen the renderings, of course, of what the stadium is supposed to look like. We really haven't seen renderings as far as what the adjoining entertainment district is going to look like. But as I was reading through the UNF poll, it struck me, I said, well, wait a minute here. We're trying to develop the central business district. We want restaurants. We want theaters. We want shopping. We want all of these things. And yet 2 miles away, we're talking about developing a whole area of shopping and hotels and restaurants and theaters. Aren't we talking about competing elements here, where you might have an entertainment district that's going to be at the stadium, but that's going to risk that kind of entertainment development in the central business district?
I think there is enough demand that one won't cannibalize another if there's enough funding. So
you answered. That was going to be my next question.
So my concern would be, if we develop the entertainment district at the stadium to the exclusion of funding the Emerald Trail, or to the exclusion of funding Shipyards West Park, or to the exclusion of providing incentives for some of these other developments, the historic buildings or other things in city center, I think that's problematic. I would not want to see that either or choice, and that all of the funding went to the sports entertainment district. But if we have the capacity and the will to do both, I do think there is adequate demand that you can grow the whole urban core without a problem.
All right, I have a question. I have to ask this.
Sure.
In your former leadership role as on the council, finance chair, and as council president, when you talked about the will, does this legislative body have the will to take on the political risk to do that without cannibalizing each other?
So you opened yourself up to this one perfectly.
I told you this is another program.
Because you told me to put on my political hat, and my political hat means I don't have to answer the question you ask. I can answer the question I want.
You have to learn to pivot.
So the question I'm choosing to answer is that I listened to the Finance Committee meetings this year, and I heard time after time discussion of how we might be bumping up against our debt capacity, and we have to take a hard look at what we're spending money on. And we did not fully fund all of these future years of capital projects that I would like to see downtown. And so if we've already taken that perspective, I would be concerned what adding the $1 billion number or whatever the number ends up being on top of that does to the attitude. I mean, I just want to make sure that, again, it shouldn't be an either or choice. It shouldn't be either we do septic tanks or we do the stadium. We need to be able to do both.
Mike Tolbert, you've got the last question if you'd like it.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking, and Lori, thanks again for joining us. It's been very informative and in some ways a lot of fun. Not in every way.
You're only
But
doing
in
that
most
because
ways.
you didn't get many points today.
But I'm sitting here contemplating the answer you just gave about the entertainment district at the stadium, and that's unidentified right now. But as someone said, the former Lot J project just on other lots. And I know this is probably not a good analogy, but when Martin Stein developed Regency Square across the river in Arlington, I'm pretty confident he did it mostly with private funds, not with city money. But it still, in some ways, had a long-term devastating impact on the future of downtown. It's wonderful as Regency Square was, and as much as people loved it. But in the long term, it seems to me it had an impact on downtown. And I'm not sure, tell me how doing what Mr. Khan wants to do at the stadium, other than distance, is much different from building Regency Square, but only except with public money.
So the way I would distinguish it is, and by the way, I don't have any plans. I haven't seen it. But if you're kind of going back to the concept of Lot J, there were a lot of residential units that were part of it. Mm-hmm. There were also entertainment venues that were really geared towards sporting events. So whether they become a place to watch a shrimp game or something else, but they were more of that genre. I don't think that's direct competition with the Performing Arts Center, with Florida Theater, with the growing bars scene and entertainment scene on Bay Street and in the Elbow. I think they're a different type of visitor, type of guest that would be using those. And I honestly think that there is room for both. I mean, we're 1.5 million metro area and bigger when you look at what's coming in from the adjacent counties. So if you build the residential population we're talking about building downtown, I truly think that there are plenty of customers to use that. I frankly would be more concerned about whether the people in Brooklyn and in South Bank and in City Center went down to the sports and entertainment district to use those venues, or whether those venues become more targeted event day venues.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Guys, we have run out of time, as always. These things just run so quickly. Lori, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks for having me.
Oh,
Thank
back
you, Lori.
again. There's so many things on the table that we'd love to talk about, and as you progress and we're able to get some of these projects really off the ground, we'd like to come back and review them with you.
Would love to.
Good.
Right.
Thank you all for joining us. Once again, our thanks to our sponsor, the Jacksonville Historical Society, Alan Bliss, and their donors for keeping us alive and keeping us going. We appreciate very much you all being with us, and hope that you'll send us comments that you might have. Go to our website at mikesonmike.com or to the Facebook page, and we'll be happy to take those comments and read them on the air if they come in. Once again, have a good week, everybody, and we'll see you again.
Thanks again. Thanks, Lori.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and Mike Miller can be found at your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook and YouTube. Learn more at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversations with Mike's on Mike.